Hello everyone, Prime here. Hope you've had a great day. Today, we're going to be talking about Ares versus Bellona. Now, this one's going to be a little bit different from my usual showdown, because you notice I didn't use the intro. I actually have someone with me. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, hey everyone, I am known as Augustus Octavian on Discord, but you can go ahead and just call me Desi Valentine, because that's what I usually go by on Twitch and YouTube. And good day, Prime. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, not too bad. British weather is, well, yeah, it never changes. What about you?
Texas heat, man. That never changes.
Oh, I do not envy that.
I wish it was cold, man. I love the cold weather.
I actually miss that heat as well. I say British weather never changes, and just as I say that, it's heating up. Okay, rough.
Oh no.
Yeah. But, you know, in terms of, like, a military situation, if let's say these two are leading armies, and they're in this massive battle against each other, who do you think would actually come out on top, like, all things considered?
That's a good question. I think the one thing we should probably clear up is this a siege battle or just a normal land battle? Just two massive armies going at it, or is Bellona or Ares sieging a city?
This is like, you know, open plain. Because if we include siege technology and all of that stuff, that's not really too fair on the Greeks. The Greeks would get demolished, and then Ares is kind of just there with much of an army against Bellona and her army. That's not really too fair. So I think, just to make it as even as possible, let's say it's not a siege, let's just say, you know, big open field. Let's also say that the armies, it's less about the armies and more so the two gods' ability to lead the armies, let's say.
That's a good question.
Because otherwise I think it's really unfair for the Greeks.
Yeah, because the Romans were pretty advanced for their time.
Yeah. They just get completely demolished, I think. Okay, maybe.
Okay, so I think my answer would have to be, it's a pretty hard one for me, since I love both the gods, but I'd have to give it to Bellona in the end, because I think this fight, military-wise, would be the same situation as with the war between Ares and Athena. Pretty much intelligence versus absolute bloodlust and slaughter.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that Bellona doesn't have her own, like, love of blood and all of that sort of thing. I mean, to receive, like, Bellona's sort of boons, you know, the soldiers or those that worshipped her had to do some pretty bloody rituals just to even get access to, you know, her sort of, I'll say powers. It's not, what is it? It's more like blood rage, I suppose? But blessings, yeah, blessings. Let's call them blessings. As far as the Romans were concerned, and those were quite bloody processes. And of course, Bellona herself is like completely invigorated by war and battle and all of that stuff. Practically, I'm not really going to say that she's fearless, purely just because of, well, Ares and Bellona at some point during the mythology. Roman mythology, I'm definitely sure about this for Greek mythology, but I'm fairly sure for Roman mythology, not 100%, but they proved that, you know, when Typhonus, which I always bring out this example, but whenever Typhonus came along and attacked Olympus, it was not many of the gods stayed around to defend. Zeus, and I think Athena stays and everyone else flees to Egypt. So, you know, they're not both without fear, but of course that's an extreme example, but yeah.
Alright. So, my answer is Bellona. What would you say to the military win for either Bellona or Ares?
I think Bellona is
strategy versus absolute brute force.
I think Bellona will win just because not only does she's more likely to use strategy. I mean, I still think that there's a good chance that she could lose herself and ignore strats or whatever. But see, if Ares gets damaged in battle, there's a good chance that he could end up demoralizing his men by screaming, because it was said that when he was damaged by one of his sons during, I think it was the Trojan War, might not be 100%, but he was damaged during some battle or war, conflict, and he let out this scream that pretty much it terrified a lot of the soldiers around him.
Yeah, so it'd be a very, very big demoralization shock to his troops.
To his troops, and perhaps to Bellona's troops as well, but if Bellona's there standing tall and strong and not too affected by the scream, then of course that's a massive disadvantage. And of course seeing Ares wounded in and of itself, if Bellona's wounded, either of them wounded, that will of course demoralize the soldiers as well. But it seems like it would be a worse case scenario for Ares than it would be Bellona. Of course, that said, in terms of... There's also the fact that, well, Bellona knows Ares quite well. They probably know each other fairly well, but this is a goddess that was taking care of Ares' chariot, that was taking care of his horses and all of his equipment, things like that. So she's probably more familiar with Ares than a lot of other goddesses and gods would be. So she also probably has that advantage, whereas there's less of a chance that Ares is super familiar with Bellona, just because of it tends to be that those in power, those are sort of in some sort of supreme position, don't tend to take too much or notice of their sort of, those that are serving them. So there could be that disadvantage that Ares has as well. He might miss some key things or critical things. It's a possibility. I don't know it for certain, but I just thought I'd put it out there. But yeah,
Since we got that what we think about the military perspective, why don't we move on to another topic, which is resilience of Ares and Bellona.
Considering the fact...
Now if we're going to talk about resilience, we're going to move them on to a one-on-one fight to the death.
Comparing, Mars to Bellona from Roman mythology, what do you think? How do you think that would go, that fight?
We're using their mythological...
You will use the mythological versions of the gods first, and then we'll go on to the Smite versions.
It's kind of hard to say. Rome has forgotten Bellona, and I think Ares is more the one that they kind of worshipped. So I think Ares would have the advantage over Bellona, since Ares was, of course, I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the gods got their power from worship, right?
It's definitely a factor in terms of their smite, kind of. But I guess there's something to that. One of the things that Zeus feared in terms of he feared losing power and influence over the people, but I'm not actually 100% sure if in terms of Roman mythology that affected Zeus's power.
Well, Zeus is Jupiter in the Roman mythology,
yeah.
So they're pretty much the same person.
Yeah.
But if we're not going to put that into account, if it really doesn't do anything, then I honestly think Ares would pull through in the mythological side of it.
Yeah.
I think due to him having more experience in battle than Bellona, because I don't think Bellona has seen much combat beyond. I
mean, to that I'd say that she did ride along in Ares' chariot with Ares, along with some other gods. I think also Discordia was among certain goddesses that would ride along in Ares' chariot when he went during battles, when he went to war, things like that. So she's probably seen a good share of combat. On top of that, she's also been employed, or she's fought on her own with sort of Roman legionaries to win battles and things like that. So, I don't know, I wouldn't say that she hasn't seen her fair share of combat or anything like that, but...
I'd say at the most it'd be a pretty long slugfest, but I think Ares would come out on top of it.
Yeah, I do think that Ares definitely has some advantage. I mean, I'm not sure who would necessarily be more powerful. They both have, of course, strength of the gods, which is, it seems fairly ambiguous. Of course, he's probably not rivaling Hercules or anywhere near Hercules when Hercules ascended to godhood, but there was a story in mythology, I think this is Greek mythology, where Ares and Hercules, or Heracles rather, are about to fight, and then Zeus separates them with a lightning bolt, and then they don't actually get to clash. But up until that point, Hercules was kind of on a sort of winning streak. He was kind of just beating through opponents, and then Ares was challenging him because Ares was pretty upset with him. But yeah, they didn't actually get to clash. And it's not too clear as to whether he stopped them fighting because Ares would be too much for Hercules to handle, and Zeus, of course, likes Hercules, so Hercules is saved by Zeus, or if it's simply that Hercules being a demigod, even challenging a god is a bit risque, so Zeus couldn't allow that, or in fact if it's just because they would cause too much damage fighting. It's not, the reason isn't really revealed, I guess, but it's all down to interpretation, I suppose. I choose to think that it was because Ares would have murdered Hercules, purely because if you lose a son or daughter, someone close to you, and you're angry enough to get into a fight over it, you're probably going to be very dangerous. And if you are known to be very dangerous for brutalizing things, being just incredibly destructive, yeah, Zeus probably feared for the life of Hercules, in my opinion. And considering all the things that Hercules did and the name he was making for himself, Yeah, Ares' brutality is nothing to take lightly. I mean, Bellona also has her own advantages as well. She's probably going to be fighting somewhat naked, or somewhat, she's going to be revealing certain parts of her body if you see some depictions of her. She's not completely fully clothed. They're both wearing helmets. They both have similar weaponry in terms of, like, spears, swords, and things like that. But they're both also fairly naked, and Bellona isn't exactly immune to the charms of women. Just look at what he did with Aphrodite. Of course, Aphrodite being one of, if not the most attractive, alluring goddesses in the entire pantheon, I suppose, isn't necessarily the best determinant as to what sort of resistance Ares would have to those sorts of charms, but at the same time, she must have a fairly athletic body, right? She, to some degree, should be attractive to Ares, I would think. So he'd probably have that advantage over her.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he would be distracted by that, but I don't think it would be to a very, very critical degree.
Probably not, but I just mention it just because I think it would be another advantage. Of course, also there's the advantage of she also uses a torch, so she's got more diverse ways to try and damage Ares, get through his sort of defenses. Like, if he's using a shield, maybe she could use the torch to somehow prevent him from using the shield. Perhaps. I don't know the specifics of Ares' shield, so I don't know how she could necessarily use a torch, but if she could say, if it were possible for her to, burn him with the torch, then I'm sure that would be a massive disadvantage for Ares.
Well, if the plains are dry, I'm sure she could pull that off, but I don't think that would be a very great weapon to use unless there's not outside sources such as trees, oil, grass.
It's certainly just one of the weapons that she used. I mean, as I said, they'd both be using similar weapons anyways, like spears and swords, and of course they'd also both probably have shields as well. So, yeah. I mean, I guess all things considered, I suppose Ares? Because there's also that I'm not sure how tactical a fighter Bellona would be when she's actually the one fighting. Is she more prone to her own bloodlust and joy of the fight? Because in that case, I guess Ares probably, he's like, pretty much.
If we're going to compare bloodlust between Ares and Bellona, I think Bellona can keep it in check compared to Ares. Because from all the lore I read of Ares, he's pretty much just bloodthirsty, pretty much most of the time. And even Jupiter/Zeus reviles him for this because he's pretty much all around war, murder, and bloodlust.
Right.
So yeah, I think Bellona can definitely keep it in check, but I think she may get a little prideful, if not cocky.
I still think I'd give it to Ares, though.